Behold, it's another episode of the Gaming Memories Podcast. Where I, the prophet, your host, he who hath been anointed by the gaming gods themselves, even Miyamoto the Father, Kojima the Son, and Carmack the Holy Ghost, appeared to me in prophetic vision, saying I must restore the one true gaming podcast to earth simply by interviewing creative and interesting people about their favorite gaming memories growing up. And boy, do I have someone creative and interesting today. Woohoo! Let me give you a little sneak peek. Let me give you a little bit of a trailer. Let me get my trailer voice. In a world, check, in a world crumbling. Here we go. Prepare to plunge into the pulsating, powerful panorama of Mux Mool, where magnetic melodies merge with mesmerizing beats to mold mind-bending musical masterpieces. Marvel at the mastery of this maestro as he manipulates minimalistic motifs into monumental soundscapes. Mux Mool's music mesmerizes, moving from moody, mellow moments to massive, manic crescendos, making every measure a memorable mosaic of modern electronic excellence. Meet the man behind the machine, the meticulous maker of beats, blending brash breaks with buttery bass lines in a boldly boundless audio adventure. Join us on the journey and jump into the jubilant jubilee sounds that is Mux Mool. Not too bad, right? Not too bad. Maybe that'll be the new tradition. That was kind of fun. Maybe I'm going to start introducing all my guests in the movie voice. Anyway, Mux Mool, for those who are not initiated, is a very well-established electronic musician. He's seasoned, mature, and crafty. He's awesome. He makes badass music. And actually, for all my musical episodes, I swap out the outro song. So you're going to hear some of his music, and it's unreleased. He gave us a sneak peek into new Mux Mool. This voice is just so much fun. That's it for Mux Mool in terms of what's going on. We can talk about my favorite part of the podcast, how to give me money. Now, I know a lot of you aren't ready for the law of consecration. You don't have the faith for the law of tithing, and I'm a gracious cult leader. You should be paying me 10%, giving me your firstborn child, and letting me your wives. But, we got to build up to that. We're still in the early stages of the cult here. So I'm going to allow you to waste your money in a less extreme manner. You can go to my Patreon /gaming memories, or whatever it is. It's something like that. Who types in shit into the address bar anyway? You just click the link tree in the podcast description. And I'm not going to claim that the Patreon is worth it yet. It's getting better. Like, I just uploaded a bunch of bootleg video game remixes I've done over the years. A lot of my YouTube videos, I make custom soundtracks because stock music sucks, and even if I get the artist permission to use one of their songs for one of my videos, oftentimes it gets flagged because that artist's label or management, whoever, and it's drama. So I've been making my own soundtracks to music videos. Not music videos, to YouTube videos where I have different footage or playthroughs. Been uploading those. I had one recently called Songbird's Sadness, which was the backing track for my Beauty of Cyberpunk 2077 video, and I really made this pretty cool edit that it's just not going to be used anywhere else. So I figured, hey, let's put it on Patreon as a perk. You can listen to it, you can download it, etc., etc., etc. Private Discord, exclusive content, outtakes, so on and so forth. I wouldn't say it's quite ready yet. I wouldn't say it's quite worth it, nor probably will it ever be. But think of it more as hey, if you like the content and you want to throw me $1, $2, $3, then you just get some extra perks out of it, and it will be growing with content as time goes forward. I was gonna put it off until I had this master plan, but the truth is, you can't master plan on a whiteboard. You got to just move fast and break stuff. So I opened it up. If you want to join and be an early adopter, there is actual content and perks in there now, and it will continue to grow moving forward. Other than that, you guys know the drill. You don't really need to do that. You could just simply like or comment or share the good news of the gaming gospel, and ye shall be blessed. I say these things in the name of Miyamoto the Father, Kojima the Son, and Carmack the Holy Ghost. Amen, and enjoy the show. Who are you, and why would I be so excited for you to come onto the podcast?
My name is Mux Mool, and I think I'm here because as a musician, my biggest inspiration throughout my whole career has been the music of video games.
It ran across you so long ago, I don't remember. It was just I've always known who that guy was, right?
Sure, yeah.
I personally split electronic music. Like, this is really generalized terms. Everybody has their own labels to try to make sense of all the genres. And there was electronic music before EDM kind of hit America.
Yeah.
And I would call that electronica. That's what I called it.
Yes.
When I was coming up. And it was like, obviously not necessarily made for the club or the dance floor. It was, I would say more like headphone listening music.
Yes.
I would put you in that category. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. A lot of my early stuff, that's how I was listening to. There were some bigger artists that I liked that, their music would work in the club, but part of my favorite parts of electronic music was stuff that was really great in headphones. And a lot of my early music was mixed with in headphones and for a headphone type audience. I wasn't thinking that I was going to be playing any of these songs on stage or anything when I was mixing them.
Did you set out to do music as involved as you are, or did you fall into it?
Well, I started making songs on a computer in 1998. And Acid 3.0.
Yes. I was like, if he says Acid, I'm going to be so pumped because I would use Vegas for video editing.
Yes,
and then Acid was like really similar, and they came with all these cool loops. That's so awesome. I started on Acid as well.
That's awesome. A friend of mine had it on his computer at his house, and I had never really thought about making computer music before that. I had messed around with some keyboards. Like, I'd always had a keyboard, in my room as a kid, and, I never took lessons, but like would always, plunk around on it and whatnot. But when I opened up Acid and started working with that, I was super into that. So, but I didn't put any music out until 2006. So that's a full 8 years of just sort of experimenting and talking about it, working with different gear, not really sure, different arrangements of half-assed computer equipment and DJ type gear before I got something together to release. Definitely did not expect that things were going to go as far as they did.
So it wasn't like you set out like, I'm going to pursue music. It was just this natural, I keep dinking around at this stuff. Eventually I got to a point where I felt comfortable releasing songs, and then things started happening.
Well, yeah. So what's funny is back in the glory days of MySpace, I really, really liked that you could take your songs and you could just put them on MySpace. You could just get an MP3 version of whatever you're working on, and you could have like 4 songs up there. And I loved doing that. So I was trying out with a couple different names on my MySpace music page and putting up songs, taking them down, playing them at the coffee shop I worked at, just sort of checking them out, seeing how people felt. But then there was one song that I put up on my MySpace, and it happened to catch the attention of an A&R guy from Ghostly. And he really liked the song. He wanted to put it on a compilation for his imprint label of Ghostly called Mood Gadget. That song, which got released on this compilation that he put together, and it came out on iTunes Music in 2006. So that's, pre-Apple Music, when it was still just the iTunes Music Store. But that song went on to get chosen as one of the best electronic songs of 2006 by by iTunes. Suddenly, it went from being on one compilation to being on a list of, it was like myself and Flying Lotus and Justice and all these other big names that were on this compilation. And that wasn't my first song at all, but I followed that success as far as it could go. But it's brought me here.
But what did life change at? Like, what happened after that? Were you already doing music full time, or did you?
No, I was working at many different jobs.
A coffee shop, you said.
Yeah, I was at a coffee shop. I worked at a bus boy at a few places, cashier, pizza places, lots of different jobs in Minneapolis, actually. Then in 2008, I left Minnesota to move to New York City, where this guy, Jacob Alexander, he worked at Ghostly. That's where he was working and living. And I thought, I want to make a go of this. So I dropped everything in Minneapolis and I moved to New York City and met a lot of people really fast. I managed to meet a guy named Elliot Lipp. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
Each Love Weed 3D, that album?
Each Love Weed 3D, yeah.
That album was on heavy repeat for me, or EP, whatever. I can't remember.
He really liked my music. We hit it off, and he and I went on sort of a year-long tour in 2009. And luckily for me, you know, I was kind of bouncing around at different people's houses. I didn't really have like a steady home. So when he asked me if I wanted to just get in the car with him and go drive around the country and play shows, I said yes. And I never really imagined that I was going to be performing these songs live because, you know, I've made them all in the computer. They kind of go from beginning to end. I didn't know how I was going to perform them. And at that time, in 2008, 2009, we didn't have the sort of laptop DJ shows that we have now. It wasn't really the same career path. And so I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go. Do I bring my keyboard? Do I bring my trigger finger? Like, how do I perform these songs? And we figured it out as we went.
And what'd you end up doing?
What felt right to me at the time was that I would have, because Ableton has, you can set A and B channels, sort of like on a turntable or whatever, and that I would have all of my songs that I wanted to play sort of loosely arranged and in like sort of this is the ideal path. If things go really well, I'm going to mix it this way. If there's not as many people, if it's more chill, it's going to go this way. But I have all these things ready in my performance session, and I will mix between them as I go and add little bits of drums that I had. I had like a kick and a snare and a hi-hat, a little laser sound, and some beat repeats. And I would just sort of edit them and, you know, select songs and play as I went. So I did that in that style for a long time.
Nice.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, like, I guess walk us through maybe any Easter eggs or inspiration for this early music from video games.
Well,
what were you playing? What were you thinking about? What were you trying to like incorporate?
So what's interesting about my relationship with music and video games is I did not actually see the connection between my music and video game music until it was pointed out to me much later. Probably the first time I really saw what people were talking about was maybe like 2014, and a friend of mine had said it to me, and then I had this sort of revelation where I realized that the earliest electronic music I had listened to was always coming from NES or Super Nintendo, and that I really attached myself to that. Mm-hmm. And I listened to those songs hit me so strongly, you know, Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, and, you know, even Secret of Mana, like it just really, really was there. Then after someone pointed that out, I could hear it in some of my arrangements. I could hear it. I still kind of attach myself to, you know, because with some of those older games, like the sound fonts that you had for a specific game was sometimes limited, especially for NES. And I keep my my songs limited also in the scope. I don't let it go to like 40, 50 different tracks. I try and keep it into the working parts of the song. And also just enjoying the sound of, you know, digital distortions of that kind, 8-bit, being able to hear the difference between the Sega Genesis chipset and the Super Nintendo chipset, you know, like that was important for me to know, to be able to hear the difference. So yeah, but once that was pointed out to me, that really opened up a lot of stuff for me. Yeah, I love it.
Did you start to incorporate consciously more video game influence after this evolved?
Well, I had the opportunity in 2016 to do a game soundtrack for a game called Nidhogg 2. Yeah.
I didn't know that. I've never played the game, but I've seen it on the store. I'm aware of it.
Yeah, so I did a majority of that soundtrack alongside Daedalus and Geotic, who is Baths. I don't know if you know Baths, and Dose One. He had a song on there.
With all of those names, yes.
But the developers hit me up. They were big fans. They wanted to buy one of my songs that had been released for the game, but then they also asked Ghostly if I was available to produce original music for it. And of course I was. And once I started working on that soundtrack, that was so cool because of course there's different levels for the game that are themed the way levels tend to be: ice world, desert world, you know, inside the worm world. And I knew exactly what those were going to sound like as soon as they asked me. So, you know, desert level music, there it is. That was really great. And also, to make something that isn't, and this is what I realized, that like with video game music, part of the brilliant thing is it's like it has to repeat. You may listen to the song over and over again, so it kind of has to loop into itself, and it has a beginning and it has an end, but it's going to keep going. You want it to be there. You want it to be adding to the experience, but you don't want it to be interfering too much with the sounds, the game sounds. So I was able to do that for a number of the levels, and that was some of my favorite work that I've ever done.
I've always wondered, when you produce music for a game like that, do they specifically say something like, hey, most of our sound effects are in this frequency range, leave room here, leave room there? Is that how it works?
Well, fortunately also, the developers brought me out to Game Developers Conference. I think it was 2016 that I went out there. And so I got to play an early demo of the game, and I just got to hear what the sound effects were like.
Yeah.
So I was sort of aware of what I was basically trying to avoid. So I just did that on my own. But I would like to know what other game companies ask for, because you'd think that they want them to sort of not interfere with each other.
Yeah, I've always thought that, like, even from because I get really picky. Oh, I'm really grateful when a game offers me more options to mix the volume and the different sound effects.
Yes.
Because oftentimes, like, I feel like the sound effects are too loud, or if I really like the music, I want more of that. But recently I played a game, it was Lies of P and also Lords of the Fallen, and they separated sound effects and ambient. And normally it's like your SFX is just like, you have your music, your SFX, and your voice, and you can play between those three. But I've always like, I'm hard of hearing, and so it's like, once I get to like 70, 75 dB, I start to hear normally, but anything under that.
Interesting. Okay.
I have some mid-range. It's from like ear infections as a kid. It's not like hot. I do have high-end damage from like drums and concerts, and I can't hear anything above like 13K.
Interesting. Okay.
It's pretty bad. And so like sometimes like mixes doesn't sound right to me. Right. I don't know how much is just subjective in there or how much is my hearing, but because some people put so much effort into some of these ambient sound beds, and in order for me to hear it and enjoy it, everything is so loud, I can't turn it up that loud or it'll blow my brains out.
Right.
So I really enjoyed it with Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen. Like, I can turn sound effects down, but leave the ambience up, and then I can even turn the music down, right? And I can balance this. And then I got to really enjoy like how many layers and how much depth was created in these sound beds, and each, like you said, each area had like slightly different things, and the reverbs would change based on how big the rooms are.
Yes, yeah.
And like really cool stuff that a lot of time I don't get to hear because, the mix is whatever, and I have my own hearing problem. So I've always wondered, like, how do they decide that? Like, are they saying like, okay, all of our sound effects are around 2.6, and we want to make sure that you leave a little space so those cut through? Or do they do that in mixing? Like, do they take your music and do they just like sidechain it to like, anytime a sound effect happens, we're going to duck the music? I mean, I don't know how that works.
They may actually, I might have to go back and play a little bit of Nidhogg 2 to see if they did that. Because I never thought of that as something they may have done. I know it's something that they could do, but I'm not sure if they did. And I've never listened for it, so I don't know if I ever noticed.
Yeah. Have you ever used a plugin called Track Spacer?
No.
Basically, you just say like, look at this track, and make space for each other, and then it'll kind of give you options instead of you having to manually do it with EQ. And it's dynamic, a little like, have you used Soothe by chance?
Yes.
So it's like Soothe, but it reads two tracks, and then it's kind of like, you say how much space do you want, give preference to this track or that, or do you want to, and then you can kind of see. I've always imagined they have to do something like that in video games, right? Because I think a lot of the time, if you're creating music, you don't necessarily know what the other sounds are going to sound like. Maybe they're still in development. Maybe that guy's still working on that. So like, how do you put it all together? And then they also do, I see like that program WWise come up a lot in like splash screens. So it's like, the voice is to the left if my camera is to the left and the person's to the left, and it'll get the 3D sound. How do you make that work? I've always wondered that.
Yes, I wonder that too, because that's an amazing immersive part of video games. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
I've never,
Well, I guess someone takes your music and then they decide how they're going to incorporate it. It'd be interesting. I would love to hear some feedback if you went back and played it. and you're like, you know what, they are like maybe side chaining or ducking something based when sounds come in, or you know, like I like a very common thing I'll notice is like if someone's speaking, everything else will drop by like 12 dB, right? And maybe the high and low will get muffled or something, and then it'll kind of open back up when they're done speaking.
Yeah.
I would assume there's even more subtle stuff going on. Back in the day when you're talking about SNES and NES soundtracks, I doubt a lot of that stuff was possible or easy to do. And I think it took a lot of almost like master planning and maybe intuition. You brought up Chrono Trigger, which is, depending on the day, my number 1 or number 2 soundtrack of all time.
What's the other one competing there?
That depends.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
That depends. So Chrono Trigger is like really consistent. A lot of things have been shaken up for me because I replayed a lot of old games. I went through and played Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, 10, and 12 last year for a bunch of content for the podcast and social media.
Sure, yeah.
And a bunch of that stuff got switched up. Tactics is usually like my number 1 in general, and I really like the music, but that's also influenced by the art style and the themes. The raw music, that's a really good question. Who would I say competes with Chrono Trigger? Probably Suikoden 2.
Okay. See, that one, that's not a game that I've played, but when I was I don't know how long ago it was, but I was starting to write to themes for video game stuff because I enjoyed doing that. So I was like, what if I just make some game sounds right now? What happens if I look for music for Ice Worlds? And Suikoden definitely came up a few times on my searches. So
yeah. Have you played it by chance?
Nope, I haven't played it.
Are you into RPGs, JRPGs?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Suikoden 2 is my favorite JRPG of all time. Fans of the show will know I've argued for it. There's no point to retweet myself. So I'm a big fan of the game.
Yes.
Do I think it's perfect? I don't think any game is perfect. It's just personally my favorite. There is a remaster coming out supposedly this year.
Okay.
It looks really good. And there's been some really good like retro remasters. There was one for Star Ocean Second Story R that came out recently, and I'm through most of it, and it was done extremely well, where they didn't remake the game, but they remade it in like a retro style, but they fixed, like if you wanted to Google some footage of Star Ocean Second Story R, that's similar to what the Suikoden 2 remake is looking like. They're redoing backgrounds, but they're maintaining like a pixel style, tons of quality of life improvements, like TDM improvements, so fast and snappy. So I'm really excited for that. I would say if you are interested in playing it, you definitely should, but wait. I have a feeling the remaster...
Wait until that... Okay.
Yeah. I have a feeling it will be overall the superior experience. I think no remaster or remake is ever perfect and going to appease everybody. But I think overall it'll probably be the best way to play, and I'd highly recommend it. It's things I like about Suikoden 2. One, the music. The reason I brought that up, there's only a few games where there's been certain towns or environments where I'll have a save slot for that town, and I'll just put it on, and then I'll just let the game idle. Yeah. And just have that music playing. Because back in the day, most of the games you could just put like the disc into a PS1.
You could just play some of the tracks, yeah.
Some of them, yeah. Some of them you couldn't, right? So I just got used to like, I don't know if you ever ran across this old CRT TV called the GX TV. Do you remember seeing that?
Does that open?
Yes, the speakers open.
Yep.
Little 13-inch CRT with speakers and a quote subwoofer on the back, but dude, it was like 4 inches. Like this.
Yeah, right.
This was, I didn't know at the time. Like I'm like, it's got a sub. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Not really, but it actually pumped out some music. I probably lost some of my hearing from that damn TV.
Just from that, yeah. Sure.
Because that little thing I'd put in the corner of my room, and there's a town. Name of the town in Suikoden 2 is spacing me right now. But there's one particular town. Another one I would do that with a lot is the world map music in Final Fantasy VIII. The track's called Blue Fields.
Yes, I know it. Yep.
Yeah. Fantastic track.
Yes.
I've always wanted to do some sort of remake, or maybe like put it in a song in a subtle way that, it's quote original, but like a music head would be able to recognize, like, wait a minute.
Sure.
That's Blue Fields, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I always enjoy when I can hear, like, I'm always the guy in the group of friends, like, I'll hear something, but I'm like, you know what? That's a flip of that. Go on that song. Like, really? You guys hear that? That's just like, I think it's cool. There was a series of YouTube videos that came out, I think in like the right around the same time, 2008, 2009, called Everything's a Remix. I don't know if you ran across that YouTube series.
No, I'm not familiar. No.
I know I'm not like a once-in-a-generation savant, Jimi Hendrix or something, right? My creative processes is I'm taking little bits and pieces of things that I like, running it through my personal filter, swapping them around, and it's coming out.
Yeah.
And, it's not original in like the really raw sense of the term. And so I've always enjoyed, in some video game music sometimes, like you hear things where like, oh, they're obviously paying homage to this game on purpose. Like I recently played Sea of Stars,
right,
which is a Chrono Trigger spiritual successor or spiritual.
Yeah, I downloaded a demo for that, and I intend to play that because I played the demo, and yes, I could feel all of that. And they also had Yasunori Mitsuda or whatever, like guest on some of the tracks. Yeah, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just definitely some areas in that game where it was like, it's obvious that they want it to sound like Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
Right? And I like that quite a bit. So Suikoden 2 is definitely up there. Now, if you don't mind me asking, it seems like you're close to my same age. What year were you born?
I was born in 1982. I'm 41.
Okay, I'm 85, so I'm 39. So we're pretty close.
Okay, yeah, pretty close.
The reason I ask is it's a tradition. I always try to guess people's first console. And if you or 81, that puts you at most likely either the 2600 or the NES. I'm going to go with the NES.
Yep, NES.
Yeah,
yep.
Nice. What's the first game you remember ever seeing?
On the NES, I think, well, okay, I'm not going to say Mario, although it probably was Mario, but I think Zelda is the earliest one, because I don't have a memory of playing Mario, although I'm just certain that it happened, but Zelda. And definitely had the Zelda music in my heart starting very early on.
I would say I've had quite a few producers on the show.
Yeah.
And I would say music-wise, Zelda is probably the most common one that comes up. It seems like the soundtrack to those games specifically, I mean, a lot of the JRPGs, I've noticed like a lot of producers are gamers, which is why I started having more of them on.
Yeah.
Or were gamers at a certain time and maybe they moved away from it, but they had a period where they were way into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you have the JRPGs and the Zelda games that seem to constantly come up as like people's main inspiration for music.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll get like, I had someone on recently where they made like darker electronics. So it was like Silent Hill, Resident Evil, like that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But I would say in general, Zelda is by far the most common musical inspiration I've had mentioned on the show. And what's interesting is like everyone can sing the theme song. And it's like all the other music, as soon as you hear it, at least for me, you know it. But many of the melodies I wouldn't be able to sing from memory, but they're like there still.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think for a lot of musicians, that is true. That happens to me sometimes where I'll hear something on the radio or XM radio that I have not heard since I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. And if you were to ask me the name of the song or whatever, I could not tell you. But as soon as I start hearing it,
it all comes back.
Yeah, it's a backdoor to memory. It brings that stuff back up immediately.
Would you consider, I mean, I've been following you on social media. You post like gaming related stuff or stories at least fairly often.
Yeah, stories, yeah.
Would you consider yourself a gamer?
You know, it's hard for me to say because there is in modern era, what classifies as a gamer is a little more intense than I think I've ever actually been. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not worried about offending gamers or anything here, but I don't fully fit into that. But part of why I consider myself a gamer because my love for video games is so strong. It's so complete. It's so full. They fill my heart. When I'm at the gym, I watch. There's an account a YouTuber I follow called You Can Beat Video Games.
Ah, never heard of it.
He tells you how to beat all these old games from beginning to end, and it's perfect for my workouts. But my life is surrounded by video games, and I love it. Also, as an adult with ADHD, I don't always have the capacity to play games, so I'm not spending 8. I mean, if I could spend 8 hours playing a game, that would be awesome. But sometimes I turn them on and I get bored right away and I have to try something else. That does happen. So, and I also don't play a ton of modern games. It's hit or miss for me. So I play a lot of retro games. Like I just played through Chrono Trigger again recently. I'm also playing Portal 2 right now. I have F-Zero 99 because it's a throwback, but it's, but it's, the modern version of that. I don't always play modern games. So that is the long form of saying that I would consider myself a gamer. I certainly play more video games than a lot of other adults.
Yeah.
And I still think about it a lot. I also put on video games when I'm doing chores and stuff. I put on like long plays. I love long plays.
Yeah, I'm the same way. There's so many games, there's so little time. So sometimes I might like watch a YouTube edit of all the cutscenes of a game and just get immersed in the lore, right?
Yeah.
I did that with Devil May Cry 5 because I had played all of them. And for some reason, didn't want to commit to the game, but I thought the graphics were awesome. And I wanted to see where the story went. And the cutscenes are so good in that game. People edit together all the cutscenes. You can sit down and break it up. Yeah, break it up over a couple sessions, like almost like a TV show. I almost exclusively play retro games. Now, most of my content, I get like a double whammy out of that because I get a lot of content.
Yeah. That's how I came across you too. Yeah. Was the how you play all those old games. Yes, I love those. Yeah.
And by the way, I saw the like. It's like in the beginning when it was growing, I would like have the time to check. Now it's like it's a blessing, but like I can't even keep up. Like
I'm sure. Yeah,
it's like so many. I have enough requests for the next 10 years at the rate that I can make videos. But I saw the notification that it was like, and it's the same thing. Like I hadn't listened to your music in a while, but there was this period of time where it was you and Elliot Lip, that Peace Left, Weeb 3D, and then like a collection of your songs. And I'm very like obsessive. So it's like when I listen to when I'm into this person, like it's all day, every day.
Into it. Right. Yeah.
And then that might last 6 months. And then I like get obsessed with somebody else. And there was this time where it was you and Elliot Lip. And then like, as soon as I saw the name, I was like, oh my God, that's like I know that person.
Yeah.
I probably put like 10,000 hours of listening in like during, a 2-3 years, because I'm also very obsessive about songs. Like I'll put the same song on repeat.
Yeah.
Based on like what I'm doing. And in college, I was listening to you a lot in college. I had art classes. And so I would put on there were certain songs that I would put on repeat while I did art.
I got to tell you, man, what you just said right there is probably my favorite thing that I ever hear from anybody, is that I get to be the backdrop for people doing other art.
Yes.
Or in some cases, people, they heard my songs and they decided that they wanted to start making music. Or in some cases, people have, they tell me how much they'll study to my music or they'll code to my music. I love that because that, as an artist, knowing that I've helped bring about other art makes me feel great. I love that.
Yeah, I know that feeling, and that's someone who's really into it. It's just like you're into it. You're ahead, right? You love music and art, and I find that personalities like you are also very into other art, even if they don't produce it. It doesn't surprise me that you're putting on video games while you're doing chores because you're consuming other art, right? You're enjoying other creativity, and you value creativity.
That's one of the things that I thought was interesting about your channel and how you play some retro games on modern PC and stuff, was because, I've thought about this too, where there are games that I was, I saw, like, say, in like Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine or something, but I was never able to have the game because I didn't have the right PC, or, and that the games aren't really that easy to get anymore. And if I could like get a copy of it, I can't really install it. It's hard to play some of these older games from the era of DOS games, which is also another, gaming, genre. I would consider DOS games a genre, even though, but like I can't play them. So to be able to see a playthrough of some of these games is like reviving, because that's the vision of a whole team of people, art directors and designers and, musicians and programmers. And, I want to see that. I get a particular nostalgia from finding things like that and sort of bringing them back up, because I find that all very inspirational. The dark world of going into a DOS game, like a DOS screen of just, black with white letters, and the portal into a video game from there is something I kind of miss sometimes. I mean, we're always on the internet and on our computers all the time now. They're so powerful. My phone is, 4,000 times as powerful as my old Acer PC, but it's just immediately there. I kind of miss the getting into it, getting a game to work, going to the computer lab after school to get on the internet to download an editor for your characters for XCOM that you have to put onto a floppy disk and bring it home. It's just like more complicated. And so when I came across your videos and you were showing how, the meticulous process of not just having it, but bringing it up to speed so that it is playable in your own way. And I just thought that was a really, that's pretty honorable to the original vision of these games that might otherwise just go away.
A lot of people would disagree with you. Every day I get hundreds
really?
of comments where like, you fucking ruined it. So-and-so would be ashamed.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, I get it. So, I've actually developed this almost like disclaimer that gets more refined that I post on every video. It's like the most common objections, the most common complaints. And one of them is like, look, this is just how I play. I'm not saying this is how you should play.
Yeah.
This is just like, I enjoy like taking an old game and seeing what I can do to it to push it farther. It's
Sure.
like, it's a hobby. This podcast started out as just a podcast, and then the pandemic hit and I couldn't train at night. And so I just started like drinking and gaming and like posting like traditional Twitch highlights, but it's like, I don't stream. I'm not that type of gamer. And eventually it was just like, well, what do I genuinely do? I tinker with old games and like see what I can do with them. So I'm just going to start, and like things really started taking off because I think that's just genuinely what I can offer is like, this is one thing that I genuinely am into. A lot of people do not appreciate it. They think it's kind of like bastardizing the original art. Kind of when things were taking off, I would get sucked in to, and I'm sure you've learned this on social media, like it's just never worth getting sucked into any sort of disagreement.
Yeah, fighting online is not something I do. But yes, yeah.
And I've learned the hard way a couple of times because a lot of times it's like I have this genuine like, no, like I really am not trying to bastardize this. It's like because I do love this. This is why I'm doing it, and we love the same game. We just have different tastes. But we were talking about limitations in your music. And limitations, I was the theme with the DOS box. Like I love this idea of going in, I get sucked into this world. And it's because you can't get distracted with the internet. Like this does one thing. You open your little command line, you got to type the name in right. If you type it in wrong, the game won't launch. Right. And the limitations suck you in. And with emulation and playing old games, it's like you can't do anything to these games. You only have limited options, and each game is a little bit different. And each game's like this little puzzle of like, okay, if the game's really popular, there might be a lot of community stuff out there. And I'm like really supportive of, there's all these people out there that are like hardcore gamers. They love old games and they're creating texture packs or mods or patches for old games for free, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't monetize any of this stuff. It's all like under fair use. And people get angry about emulation and piracy. And I think there is an argument for that. But as you mentioned, I don't know if you're familiar with this statistic, but according to some different museums and research groups, is anywhere between 87 to 90% of all games are like completely abandoned, meaning there's no way you can purchase them, right?
Right.
And a small subset of that, like maybe 30% of those are available in some physical form on the secondhand market. But like I just bought Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 for the Wii because I know it's rare. And I was just like, what, this is a good one to have for the collection. I think it'll be worth more money down the road. But if you want to play that game and it's not commercially available anywhere, you don't owe me anything to have to buy it off eBay and I want to upsell it by $100 and charge you $200. Like I didn't develop the game.
Right.
I'm not the artist.
Yeah, that's a great point because the reselling market, that's just between people now. No,
just between people. So,
right.
A lot of people say it's piracy. You need to you can buy a used copy. Well, only like out of that 90% of games that are not commercially available, somewhere I would guess between 10 to 30% of them, depending on where you live. If you live in Eastern Europe, South America, East Asia, like the Philippines, like you're not going to be able to get a copy of one of these games. And if you are, it's going to cost you 4 months' salary. In North America, we're pretty lucky. There's a lot of games you can hop on eBay. You might be able to, this Dragon Ball Z game was $100, right? That's pretty expensive for a game, but I bet there was like 200 and something copies on eBay at any given time, right? supply is only going to go down, demand's only going to go up. And I just think that like emulation and this whole community of people like doing fan translations for games that were maybe only released in Japan, they're commercially dead. Nobody's ever going to translate that game. So someone does that for free. And the only way to play that game is to download a patched ROM online and technically illegally play it. And I just, people get angry about that. But I think if they thought about it more, they would understand.
Yeah.
They'd understand that, like, look, if you look at my Steam library, anytime there's a remake or a remaster, I bought it. I bought Mass Effect Legendary Edition 3 times because I just love those games. And I'm so happy they repackaged them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have thousands of games, and it's not like I'm not going to support artists with my money, but also like I'm playing this game. There's a few games I'm playing right now. It's like, yeah, I could go buy that game maybe. Like, for example, if you wanted to play Suikoden 2,
right,
or Valkyrie, like Valkyrie Profile is one I'm playing right now. There was only 73,000 copies of that game sold in North America. At any given time, there might be 500 to 1,000 online and available. And then you're going to have to pay an arm and a leg. Do I think you're a bad person if you just download that game instead of buying it from someone like me and so I can make a profit? It's like, I don't think so. Now, a lot of people disagree. They let me know in the comments. A lot of people feel like if I alter the game's visuals, like I upscale it, or someone like you uses AI to run all the textures to an upscaler, and then you can patch that in and have, they think that that's like bastardizing the original vision. And there is some argument. I can see that argument to an extent, but the term that really gets at me is to say that's not how the developers intended it. And I'm like, no, the developers worked with the limitations they had. You can't tell me, you can't tell me that they're making Chrono Trigger for the SNES. If they had access to a PS5, would they still make the SNES version? No, they would not.
Right. No, I find this all very fascinating, what you're telling me, because I have no insight into this, or that you would be criticized for this, but
all the time.
I basically feel exactly the opposite of all of those, anybody criticizing you for that.
There's certain mods, like especially when a game gets like decompiled on the PC. Like, for example, Super Mario 64 has a decomp. A decomp is when they reverse engineer the code, but they write all the original code, because the two things you can copyright that don't fall under fair use would be the actual assets, the art, the music, the textures, and then the code. Now, emulation is legal because the emulator is all original code. It's basically just tricking a computer into thinking it is a console, and then you provide that with the original game file. How you source that game file is not the developer of the emulator's responsibility. So emulators are perfectly legal under the pretense that you actually own the game and you're using a digital copy of the game. That's what makes them, quote, legal. Now, a decomp is a little bit different. That is saying, like, okay, we're going to reverse engineer Mario 64, but write all original code and make this game like a native PC game, which then blows open the doors. You're not limited, right? You can swap out models, you can swap out textures, you can change logic, yada, yada, yada. But in order to play it, you have to provide the ROM. And what the program will do is it will take the assets from the ROM or the ISO, and then it'll apply it to this wholly original set of code that's designed to play this one game as a native PC game. So it's this weird middle ground. Now, for these decomps, you're much less limited. So, like, I can play Mario 64 as Doom Guy with the shotgun.
Yeah,
and vice versa, right?
I've seen clips like this. Yeah.
Yes. So when you get into that realm, I do think people could say, like, well, you're really changing the original vision of the game. But I also, like, I can in good faith think, like, if I was a developer of a game and I saw that, I'd be stoked.
That's, I'm kind of thinking about this in terms of, like, because when I first started putting out music, it was torrenting became very popular around that time. And I remember I was in India and being interviewed. Everybody who was asking me questions when I was there was wondering how I felt about torrenting. That was like the most popular question on this like tour. And I was just telling everybody that, like, you can't do anything about torrenting. It's here to stay, or whatever. It's already a force. And I personally, as an artist, if someone wanted to have my song, but they couldn't afford it, I would rather they be able to have it than to never hear it at all. I mean, and that's just me. Mm-hmm. But I think with the developers from some of these games, certainly a lot of them have to feel that way, because, you also, when you put something out in the world, like when I put out a song in the world, I don't know where it's going to end up or where it's going to bring me. but a lot of songs have taken on different forms and, been put into different YouTube clips and this and that. I think for developers to see their gaming worlds, like if you were to put together Doom 2 and Mario 64, I think everybody involved on both of those sides would love to see those worlds collide.
Yeah, I think the vast majority would, for sure.
Yeah.
And so, I do. I mean, I'm glad you liked the content. I'm glad, you popped in and I remembered like, oh my God, I've listened to so much of his music.
Yeah.
It didn't surprise me. Like I figured you'd be a gamer. I kind of actually maybe subconsciously intuited that, I'm like, you know what?
Sure. Yeah.
When I start thinking about his music and looking at his Instagram, I'm like, yeah, this should be a great guest.
Yeah. I mean, playing video games for me, same as making music. It's always been great. You just go into a dark room, just you and your screen by yourself. It's a good time, man.
It's the best, dude.
Yeah.
And I love this. When I can just like sit down, like I am playing a modern game right now. Well, I've been getting into camera hacks. So doing in-game cinematography. There's a great, I would like to shout out this Patreon. His name's Otis INF or Franz Borma on Twitter. He does camera hacks for games. I think I pay like $5 a month. And he basically, depending on the game and the engine it uses, you download a little program. They all pretty much work the same. You inject it into the game, and then now you have control of the camera. You can detach it from the third person.
Yes, I've seen some of this too, because people they can find like hidden objects and maps.
Yes.
And,
So there's like boundary break where they'll go and search. But I've been really getting into a cinematography. Like I want to make shots and ambient. Like I've been doing this series. I've done a few YouTube videos where I do like the beauty of X game, and I'll play through a game. But every time I see a location that looks awesome, take the camera off, I'll shoot some different shots, some different angles, some cool movements. Obviously, if I have mods and like I'm injecting, I'm tweaking the game to look as good as I can to my personal preference. And then I'm uploading that. And I'm always like, then it's like, okay, a lot of times I'll turn the music off. But then I'll reach out to someone maybe like you. I reach out to, I don't know if you're familiar with the musician called Black Moth. He does like all dark ambient.
Super Rainbow?
No. I don't know. You played with them back in the day. Where are they at these days? What happened to them?
Oh, well, Black Moth Super Rainbow was the band form, but now it's just main songwriter Tom, who releases under the name Tobacco.
I did not know that.
And it's just him now.
I did not know that. This is BLAKMOTH, I believe. He's been on the podcast.
Okay.
It's been like, I don't even know how I got off this subject, but I've been way into playing some modern games because those are the ones that are in 3D and you can actually do this. Obviously, that's not possible like on an NES game or something like that. There is a cool emulator called 3D Sen. There's an emulator that somehow is like, most emulators can't be on Steam. Dolphin just had this huge fiasco. It was going to be on Steam. Nintendo shut it down. But 3D Sen is on Steam and it rebuilds NES games in real time in 3D.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I've seen that. Yes. I've seen that for Zelda, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really cool way to play through old games if you're interested. Like if you're into retro gaming, then you want to like play Zelda again, but not with a slight different, like, some sort of different twist. I think anyway, I'm just like, that's what I'm really, really into. Some people don't like it, but a lot of people do. And so I'm just going to keep doing that. I did want to ask you, so you talked about NES and that you've always been into gaming. Was there a game in particular that like really turned you into a mega gaming fan? Like the first game that really took you in and influenced you?
That would have to be Secret of Mana.
Aha.
Which I have tried to revisit that game a couple times as an adult, but I haven't managed to make it all the way through. I may try again. But when I was a kid, there were ads for Secret of Mana on TV. And every time I would see an ad, I thought I might die. I was so excited by the game. And, we would rent it and I would play it. And then there was a year that my mom got it for me for Christmas. And that was over for me. And I played so much Secret of Mana, maxed out my characters and everything and just stayed at the end of the game and continued. There's a final floating level, like a lot of RPGs. And I would just go through and kill the enemies again and again and again and just stay there and fly around on the dragon and everything. Oh, that was so huge for me.
So it was an RPG. that kind of
Yes,
caught you
yeah.
first. Yeah.
And of course, my PlayStation in 1997.
Now we're talking. My favorite console is the PlayStation.
With in Final Fantasy VII, same thing happened to me when I saw the ads for that. I would take pictures of it out of magazines and put it in my notebooks at school. I would try and draw the characters. I was so obsessed with that game. I was so proud when I maxed out the clock and everything. And, I defeated Emerald Weapon. Or no, wait. I only defeated one of the two weapons. Ruby.
Either Emerald or Ruby, the red or the green one.
Whatever one gives you the Desert Rose, you can get the gold chocobo with.
That's Ruby.
Ruby, yes.
Yeah.
But I never defeated Emerald Weapon. Never. That's one
I couldn't beat
I haven't
either of those until much later as an adult. So props to you.
Well, it's funny because when I finally got the Desert Rose and then I got the gold chocobo that you get with that, the gold chocobo that I had bred was way better. And so I was like, this is garbage.
I was going to say, the only way I've ever beaten Ruby was using Knights of the Round, which you need a gold chocobo to get it anyway. Yeah. It was actually last year. I played through 7 with all, like, the original 7 on Steam because it's such a popular game, there's a very robust modding scene. Like, you have a lot of options.
Yeah.
And you can basically turn that game into like a Dreamcast game right now. There's even a full voice acting mod, like every line voice acted by fans, and it's surprisingly good. But anyway.
Oh, you know what? I've seen clips of this too. Now I know what you're talking. Now I know what the clips are that I'm seeing. What you're talking
I think it's called like Echo S something, but that's like the name of the voice mod. But I beat Ruby Weapon just for the first time, like last year, 2023.
Love it.
So
love it.
Yeah. Way ahead. Final Fantasy VII was the only game, or the only time that I've like flat out just stolen from a store. There was I was probably like 10 or 11 or 12, somewhere in that range. They had a Final Fantasy VII poster of Cloud standing next to the bike, like right at the end of Midgar.
Ah, yes.
And I wanted it. I was so excited for that game, and I wanted it so bad. I ripped out. It was like one of those fold out, so it was like 2 pages long.
And you just took it?
I took it, and I went home, and I felt so bad. I told my mom like an hour later, and she made me go back and talk to the store manager, and it was like, for me at the time, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
But I was like, I wanted that game so bad, I was willing to steal for it.
Yeah.
Anything else, like after Secret of Mana, kind of walk us through the games that impacted you the most, what obsessed you the most, the worlds you got into?
So a lot of RPGs, because a lot of RPGs had some of the best music. Nobuo Uematsu for Final Fantasy VI, super deep, emotive music for that. Of course, we talked about Chrono Trigger. It's a lot of people or older people's favorite game, but that music was really big for me. And you're talking about the TV, and you would just lift those speakers open and listen. I would go to 600 AD and let the 600 AD music play because it just got to me. So those were big ones for me on Super Nintendo. And of course, Zelda, it's a Link to the Past or whatever. Love that too. Play that every, periodically. And then from Super Nintendo, we had a Nintendo 64, but I did not have a lot of attachments to the Nintendo 64 other than Diddy Kong Racing, which at a certain point, that was the only game that we had. So I played a lot of that. But yeah, with PlayStation, Final Fantasy VII, of course, Metal Gear Solid, really great music for that, really cinematic there. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
Ooh.
And it was right around that time when Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 came out that I started where I smoked weed for the first time.
Yes.
So, so things changed a little bit around that time because of that.
How old were you?
I must have been 17 or 18.
Right around when I think I smoked weed for the first time at 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember having a few times where I would, smoke weed, start playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 and just get into like a flow state of like landing tricks. Oh man, that was an incredible. I'd just be feeling the combos coming out, and then look down and it's like, a 4 million point trick, and I've gone all the way around school too. So that was always really fun.
Tony Hawk wasn't the first one to do it, but it was a big game. Also, music, like the licensed music.
Yes. Big
deal.
Yeah. And yeah, those songs are certainly in my heart very deeply. I'm sorry. I'm forgetting we're talking about consoles here, but There is another thread of gaming that was also really strong for me, and that also relates to my music, was, like I said, DOS games. So when I was 12, my mom got me, like I said, an Acer computer from like Circuit City or something like that.
Damn, Circuit City's a throwback. I forgot about that.
I had a 66 megahertz processor, 8 megabytes of RAM, and a 400 megabyte hard drive with a 2x CD drive, and DOS and Windows 95. And I loved that computer so much. I spent all day with that. So that's part of where, some of my computer music started too, because I was just spending a lot of time with the computer and learning how computers work and moving things around and learning how to troubleshoot. Kind of having an emotional attachment to my computer, sort of being like one of my better friends. It's, who I'm spending time with and having all these good times with. And, so this is, I'm not sure if I was 12, so that would probably be 1993, 1994. So DOS games. Did you ever play Dune 2, Dune 2?
Oh.
Based on the...
Oh, did I?
Yes.
Love that. So I'm a huge Dune fan. I recently, I was a guest on the King of Games. Shout out King of Games. Check it out if you're interested. Where they take games from a certain year, they put them head to head, and they decide what the best game of the year is. Anyway, I argued for Dune 2 to like beat everybody.
Yeah.
This obscure, like, because it's the mother or the godfather of the RTS genre.
Yes. Yeah.
That game, did not have a computer, but I had a friend. Like a lot of people have like that friend.
Yes.
Whose
I've
dad
had
was
this
a
experience too. Yes, yeah.
And so he had Dune too because he had a computer.
Yeah.
And goddamn, the cutscenes, the pixel art, and the cutscenes and the music. My first introduction to the Dune franchise was Dune 2. Loved that game. Awesome.
Yes. So much time playing Dune. Played with beating the game with all 3 houses.
Yeah.
God, I loved that.
I loved I thought the Harkonnen were so badass.
So badass.
So badass. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, I played Command & Conquer, Command & Conquer Red Alert, Warcraft, Warcraft 2. So much time with Warcraft 2. And then that was my first experience with, you could make maps and then you could share maps.
Yes.
And then you could download other people's maps. And that was really fun. Diablo, of course. And that's another amazing soundtrack. Town music from Diablo. Whoa, I love that. And then I would also go to... So I couldn't play newer games, and I couldn't afford a new computer. Everything that I wanted to play had to run on my, rapidly aging PC. Like I could play Quake, I could install Quake, but it did not really, it just stuttered. There were some 3D games that I tried to install that were, because it used to get like...
The freeware, like the trial.
Demo discs and stuff. Yes, love those. So I played a lot of just demos of games. But then when I wanted to play new DOS games, I had to just sort of stay in the era of my DOS game or older. And so I would find certain PC games that were at thrift stores and stuff that I hadn't even heard of, but I'm just like selecting based on the box art.
Any deep cuts that stick out to you that you like?
A couple that I don't know anybody else that ever played, but one was Syndicate. Which,
yeah. I haven't played it, but because I'm like just into gaming, try to keep tabs of like cult classics, maybe to cover. Yeah. It's definitely there is a group of people that love that game.
Yeah,
online. Yeah,
and I could never. There's a few games where, and Syndicate is one of them. I could never really get. I get to a point in the game where I cannot progress because I'm missing some key detail about how to upgrade your people or how to make money or something. And same thing with XCOM. I loved XCOM so much. I would get in and I'm like, this time I'm going to beat it. This time I'm going to do it. And I still never have. Not until I was able to, like I said, download the character editors. Wow. Yeah, right. Yeah. So Syndicate is definitely a deep cut, but also a game called Crusader.
I don't know if I know that one. Let me look it up real quick.
It's not great. It's pretty stiff, but I loved the guy. When it comes to video games, I'm very armor motivated. I want a cool armor set.
Oh, this looks cool. It's like a top-down isometric.
Yeah, it's an isometric thing. but it's not live action like Diablo. It's turn based, so it becomes a little awkward. But I liked the environments. I thought it looked cool.
It's got the classic like '90s FMV sequences of corny actors.
Yes, definitely. Probably the deepest cut. This game, I don't know why I attached myself so much to it, but it was called Twinson's Odyssey.
This is never been brought up before on the show, so this is cool.
It's kind of like a kid's game. I was a teenager when I was playing it, and it's very, soft colors, but it had excellent music. I downloaded a demo for it, and there's this theme, this like rain theme that plays whenever it rains on your island, and I loved it. I opened up the, where the game would be installed on my computer, and I found like the waveforms, and I would just listen to those. But
it's got interesting. So like some of the environments are 3D, and some of them are pre-rendered.
I think what it was so you would basically run sort of Resident Evil style with the controls being like that, but there was a button you could press where it would move the camera behind you, and then that would be the camera angle, and then you could sort of change it based on where you were or which direction you were facing. It was a little awkward. Then when you go inside of a building, it's fixed isometric.
So I see. Yeah. So the outdoor are these 3D environments, and then then indoor, you're right, they're isometric.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The weapon is like a bouncy ball that you throw at like hot dog characters. It's pretty friendly, but I loved it.
The dude looks like a drunken Shaolin monk, like his animations.
Yeah.
This is cool. This will probably be the highlight for the podcast because I've never heard of this game. It's a super nice. I like to feature like the deep cuts. Yeah.
Yes, this is probably the deepest cut because no one else. I've never talked to anybody else that's played that game, but I played it so much because you could just go to these. You could go to like 3D sort of atmospheres, and I would just hang out there. Just walk around. But there's voice acting in that too, which I don't know. I was very into that world of that.
Any other deep cuts? Let's move on. What else sticks out to you?
I also played a lot of Tyrion 2000. That has an amazing, amazing soundtrack that I played on my AWE 32 MIDI. That was my MIDI driver for my old PC. I still love those sounds.
The thumbnail, it looked like a shmup.
Yeah, it's a top-down shooter. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never heard of this one either.
I have played that so many times. They had it for iPad too, probably in like 2010, and I would play that on planes constantly.
It reminds me of, a lot of shmups are similar. It reminds me a little bit of Raiden.
Yes, yeah.
These are great mindless games. I played a lot of shmups in the day. I used to, speaking of art, I used to draw ships from shmups, like top-down of ships all day in school.
Yes.
Before I got into music, I was, just because in school, like you can draw, you can doodle.
Yeah, that was
what I did.
I've done a lot of my own visual art as well. I don't know, maybe I'll send some over to you, but that before I was a musician, I was always just an artist, so.
Yeah, I think I've met a lot of guests and producers where we have a lot of these similar overlaps.
Yes, it makes sense,
right? A certain personality type is going to doodle in class, be attracted to art, and then eventually it's like you find your way to either film or music or like one of these disciplines, and it either becomes like a hardcore hobby or a career. But like I've been back and forth. I did music, I think actually 2008, 2009 would have been about the time my previous alias. I made a little bit of headway. I was making a living for a while. I toured with Polish Ambassador, like did some dates with Polish Ambassador.
Yes, yeah.
Before he got, but a similar vein, like not club music. He's a little more dancey. He became more dancey over time.
Yeah.
But I was doing dates with him when Future Sex Love Computers or something. I forget that album came. It's like more like glitch hop. Yeah. But I just noticed like I met a lot of people in that sort of underground, like I was in the beginning phase of like coming up, and I just met a lot of other artists that we were opening, or we'd see each other at dates, and I would talk to them, be like, yeah, I'm into video games, I like to draw. It's like a lot of these same things. It just seems like certain personalities gravitate to this stuff, and I'm like watching this, and I'm like, I already like it. Like I love the art of this game. Like I'm like kind of geeking out on like the way the different guns and the lasers look. It's
yes. I liked checking that out too. The different ship. There's only 3 or 4 different ship designs for your own ship, But yeah, lots of different combinations of weapons. And what's cool is that when you get all the money in the when you play through a few times, because it's just you can play all the way through the game and then start over with everything again, and you get a certain amount of money, and you can only buy certain weapons on certain planets, but then you can go there and max it out and just
almost had sounds like early subtle roguelite elements to it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's 2 in a row. Honestly, not that so there are definitely there's music head. I'm into music, and then you meet somebody. I'm sure you run across them. You probably are more of a music head than I am, but you meet someone who digs all day, every day, and they're 50 years old, and they just know so much music.
Yes.
I'm definitely not that level on music. I have friends that are that level, and they just feed me stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Gaming, I'm a little bit more, I'm not a full head. There's levels,
Sure.
but I'm farther along, and it's pretty rare for someone to bring up 2 games I've never heard of. So props to you,
Love that.
sir.
Love that.
Props to you.
I'm glad I could expand your horizons of mid-90s obscure DOS games, because that is definitely something that throughout my life I may not ever be recognized for again.
And all 10 people listening to this will give you props.
Yeah.
So
hey, you know what?
Famous.
Hey, it's part of my life. Glad to be talking about it here.
Anything else kind of during this era that sticks out to you?
Oh yeah. There was another game that I played a lot of that did not run very well, but I still played a lot of it. Interstate 76.
This might be number 3. Let's see if I recognize anything when I see the footage.
It had an incredible original funk soundtrack, all real music. You just drive around in cars and shoot guns out in the desert, of course, because the desert is...
So this is number 3 for sure.
Yeah.
I was expecting a point and click. This is not a point and click.
No, it's a car simulator that takes place in the 70s. And one of the characters is voiced by John Delancey from Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Dick. The cutscenes are like that old, do you remember one of the first CGI cartoons called Reboot by chance?
Yes. Yeah, of course.
It reminds me of a little bit more janky, there's this era. I don't know if maybe you have a label for it, but there's this aesthetic that was not on consoles, that was only on PCs, early 90s PCs. I don't know what the term is for it, but this has it.
Yes, and I know exactly what you're talking about, yeah.
Damn, this looks sick. So it's you have these pretty robust cutscenes I'm watching, and then you go to a car and you can do a third person or first person. You have missiles and a turret on your car.
Yeah, and you can customize the some of the weapons, and you're trying to save the main character's sister. And in the 90s, people talked and emulated pimp culture a lot, so this kind of plays with that.
What do you mean by that? I don't follow.
So pimping, in rap songs or something.
Yeah.
No. That was so there's some of that in there, although it that wasn't why I was playing it. But
hey, look, I see a chick with some cleavage, and maybe there's a little bit of Laura Croft sex appeal going on in this game.
A little bit of square boob.
Yeah, a little bit of triangle titty.
Yeah, right.
Keep going. What else you got on the PC? Because that's actually one area. I'll be honest, it's more obviously consoles are more popular, and so most guests will talk about consoles. Most guests honestly talk about the same 10% of games. There's different
sure
memories. So I would love to mine you for more.
I'm trying to think now. Man, those are some big ones. There was another one that I played. I think it's called Terminal Velocity, but I
know.
Yeah,
it's good.
I never actually owned the actual full game. Oh, of course, Descent 2.
I was going to say Terminal Velocity is I don't know if it came out before Descent, but it's Descent type.
Oh, wait, I got another one. Have you ever played Rise of the Triads?
Yes. Well, no. I have not played it. I'm aware of it.
Yeah, I played a lot of that.
That's the YouTube edit of this will have clips of the games as we talk about them.
Oh, okay, cool.
But for listeners, it's I don't know what you'd call it. So you have early 3D games that had 2D sprites.
Yes.
Right, but they're in a 3D world. So Doom is the most popular Wolfenstein. But I would say the Triad is more like Duke Nukem 3D aesthetic.
And it was grosser. There was because with Doom, when you shoot a monster with the rocket launcher or whatever, sometimes they go, and fall apart. But in Rise of the Triads, you'd shoot people and blood would be flying everywhere, and there was a control to turn up the blood too.
Looks awesome.
Yeah, and that game also always felt kind of weird because it was like, you could tell it was just kind of copy work and just kind of reskinning, but then they tried to add like puzzle elements, and there's things you can jump on, and they tried to have, there was like power-ups that, I can't remember what they were, but the power-ups felt awkward sometimes. Like there were power-ups that just made your vision all crazy, and they tried to inject some humor into it too that probably didn't come across all the way.
Anything else going on in this 90s DOS era? Sounds like you're running a little low on deep cuts, memories getting jogged.
You know what? One of the things, like I said, one of the things that I liked about your videos was that you weren't just getting the games to work. That's something that I've gone through a number of times that has always been so funny to me, which is you go through, you get a game to work, and then you don't play it. And I think it's kind of fun sometimes just to get games to work, because I remember I had because I work on Mac, it's a more stable platform for me for Ableton, and also my younger brother works at Apple, so he gives me free Apple products sometimes.
Hell yeah.
So just
shout out to younger brother.
Yes, shout out to Clark. Apple is not the best for games.
Nope.
Back in 2011, I had an Apple laptop, and it took me a lot of work to find out how to get Final Fantasy VII running, and then I did.
Did you use Wineskin?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't remember what I did.
You know how you can like boot Macs with VMware or something where you can boot Windows on a Mac and you could have like two partitions?
Yeah.
Wineskin was like a little mini Windows environment in an app, and that's how I got lots of... I've never tried, but I remember playing Max Payne 1. Same thing, when I was doing music with the first Alias, and I was right at the time I was doing dates with Polish, and I went to Denver a bunch of times. I was playing Max Payne 1 on an old Mac laptop, and I was using same thing. Like I said, it probably took me a week to get that game to work on my Mac.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I have discovered Internet Archive.
Love that site.
Yes. So I donate. By the way, speaking of paying, I donate to them every month on an automatic payment. That. I saw this and I thought this is definitely something, it's easy for me to support. So to anybody out there, you don't have to do that, but I do. And I'm looking at my favorites because they have abandonware and stuff on there. Of course, MechWarrior 2. So huge for me. That's another game that, like you were saying, you sometimes be able to put a PlayStation disc in your CD player and play some of the tracks. You could do that with MechWarrior 2, and I listen to that music, again, so much. Dark Forces.
Yes.
Yes, loved Dark Forces. Did you ever play Full Throttle?
That sounds so familiar.
Amazing point-and-click game from LucasArts.
Okay.
And I love a lot of those point-and-click games from Maniac Mansion, Day of the Tentacle.
They do. So yeah, they remastered Full Throttle. I forgot. I'd seen this.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a genre that I never played one. There was one called an indie one that's not old called Machinarium, I think.
Yep, I played that. Yeah.
That is the only one that I've completed.
Okay.
I'm definitely uninitiated when it comes to point and click. I know they're really well respected because so many of them, like Day of the Tentacle, have been remastered.
Yeah.
So I know that there's a market for that. There's people who love it. Otherwise, why there's remasters out there. I've just, there's one like Neverhood. I think that's like claymation.
Neverhood, that's, yes. Sam and Max, those were great. There's such great sense of humor in a lot of those games. I also played a number of the King's Quest games. When I bought my computer, or when my mom bought me my computer, it came with a game called Are You Afraid of the Dark? The Curse of Orpheo's Chest, because it was a game that I owned that just, was on a CD that came in this big booklet of, CDs that they send. I played that too, and that's a point and click game.
Oh, so that uses like real footage.
Real scaled down, it's like JPEGs with interactive elements. Yeah. Which is kind of how the game Myst plays.
Yes. That I haven't heard of this either. I know there was also a whole little subgenre of games that were like this.
Yes, yeah. Harvester and Phantasmagoria.
Yes. So again, I'm aware of some of these. Never like this is a whole genre that I never played. I didn't have a PC or a Mac as at home until I became like moved out of the house. So I did get, depending on which friends had what, I would get exposure. This one particularly, the Are You Afraid of the Dark, I had never heard of.
It's fun talking about this because the game is not that good, and it's no reason for me to talk about it in a lot of other parts of my life. But it was, these things were all a big part of my life for
the only
for
deep
time.
cut that I've brought up that no one, and I try to do this almost every episode, so long-time listeners will know. The Secret Island of Dr. Quandary.
Island of...
I bring this up occasionally to see if anyone's played it.
I have not played this, but...
So the game starts out, The Secret Island of Dr. Quandary, the game starts out, you go to a carnival.
Uh-huh.
Basically, you go to a shooting gallery at a carnival, and this weird wizard guy, you play a game, and then no matter what you do, you get sucked into an alternate world, and you land on an island, and you just have to like point and click and figure stuff out. But there's just like, it's an acid trip. And I didn't know that until later, and then I started thinking about this game a couple of times, and I'm like, man, there's like a certain feeling that some games got me to feel, in some media, not just games, there's certain TV shows that would make me feel like kind of this disassociated, like I'm somewhere else, or I'm like up against the veil, and I'm like forcing my thinking to go in places that are not natural, or not normal. I wouldn't say natural, but not normal. And this game would give me this weird feeling as a kid, and it was always kind of like, I couldn't put my finger on it.
Yeah.
Like it made me feel weird. As a kid, I would just say, this game makes me feel weird. Dr. Quandary is probably the deepest cut I can think of. So deep, it took me a second to remember it.
Yes.
But that game messed with my brain in the computer school lab, right? You remember those, like the colored iMacs? Or the color, or whatever, the predates the iMac, whatever they were called. We had those number munchers, Oregon Trail.
Yep.
Actually, I would say the deepest cut. So I grew up in Utah. I grew up Mormon.
Oh, okay.
Not practicing anymore. The whole podcast is actually like a parody. I'm the one true prophet of the gaming. It's new, like.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that, but I got it.
It's there's a game based off the Book of Mormon made. I don't know if Sierra made it, and I'm now realizing. Speaking of remixes. There's Key's Quest. Yeah. There's a game called Nephi's Quest.
Love the reskinning of another game to serve a Bible message. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, and I just remember like, why is this sticking out to me? I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't played King's Quest, but I've played Nephi's Quest, which is basically the Book of Mormon version of King's Quest. And I just found it on a channel, the speed run. The guy has 5 subscribers and there's 300 views. So this is a deep cut. The whole game looks like he beat the whole game in 21 minutes.
Okay.
And I never beat this game. I tried to be a good Mormon boy, and I could never beat it. King's Quest definitely looked better. Like graphics, the pixel art was way better.
Wonderful.
I'm kind of glad we're talking about the DOS era. There is so many games in the DOS era. So many.
A lot of games.
And then like I would say like out of that like 80s, that stat of 87% of games are not commercially available. I bet a big chunk of those are DOS games because it's just like there was no dedicated console, right? It was sort of the beginning of PC games. You had floppy disks. Speaking of like the demos, I remember the local grocery store would have free demo floppy disks like hanging on a tower, and you could just take one, and it would have like 5 demos of a game.
Yeah. When the movie Independence Day came out, you could buy toys from the movie that came with discs that had games in them, and I had to have those too. And of course, the games were terrible, but I still had it's funny because I have floppy disks here in the studio because I like to play with them just for tactile
like a stress toy kind of thing. Yeah,
love doing this. Gosh, there was a lot of that, and I'm assuming also that there were probably regional software companies that released games that if it didn't come out in your area, you didn't know about it.
I bet there was. I think the barrier to entry and the cost of entry for DOS games was pretty low. Like, you have a small team, you put out games. It's just like there's been a couple guests that have talked about like PC and DOS specifically. But usually what happens is I'll get someone who's pre-NES and they're very well versed in like all the different variations of the Atari. The 2600 was the biggest one, and then you have like the ColecoVision, the TurboGrafx. So sort of the more deep cut console stuff that was pre and post NES, because the NES came and sort of changed the entire market, at least in North America, right? It took, like video games became synonymous with Nintendo. Even if when I was a kid, your parents would be like, "What are you playing, Nintendo?" It's like, no, it's a Sega Genesis. They didn't care.
Right.
It's Nintendo. Right?
It's all Nintendo.
It's all Nintendo. And so I usually get people who are very knowledgeable in the console world or kind of post, and then there's like the PC world, especially once you get into the 3D, I'll have guests that are deep into that. But now that I'm thinking about it, I haven't had a lot of people talk about this era of floppy disk DOS games. And I have like we were saying, like there were so many games.
Yeah. Yes.
And when you brought up this idea of like regional developers and like distribution,
it
makes me wonder, like Nephi's Quest, like that game may have only been available in Utah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, so yeah.
And then when they made it, they may have thought, well, why? Yes, we would like to distribute this everywhere, but let's focus on this region. And then these things, they get thrown out.
So I would get a lot of comments when I started doing the How I Play series, is when things really started blowing up, and people would say, how I play, I put the game in the console the way it's meant to play. And I would get this like variation of this comment hundreds and hundreds of times a day, right?
Yeah.
And so I dabbled into like, well, I made a response video because I also got a lot of people who would claim that I was like purposely downgrading the original footage of games. And they just didn't understand that, like, okay, this game ran at like 320 by like 210.
Yeah.
And your phone screen is like whatever, 4K. And it's also blown up to fit the phone. So like they'd be like, I don't remember it being so pixelated. Well,
yeah.
It wasn't, because you were playing on a CRT TV that was
Yes. Right.
And so I made this like really angry response video because I didn't know how to like deal. I had been doing the podcast and music, but I had never had anything like get traction. So I'd never dealt with that before.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I was making response videos for a while. And first I made this response video of like why your memory of old games is shit. And I kind of walked through how resolution works, CRT TVs, viewing distance, native resolution, anti-aliasing methods. Like a lot of old PS1 and PS2 games would inject intentional blur as an anti-aliasing method, so jaggies weren't as bad, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that video was like one of the first videos that got millions and millions of views. So I was like, oh, maybe I have something here. Let me like respond to other concerns. OG games are futile because so many of these games are lost.
Yes.
And people would say like, hey, I played the game the way it was meant to be played on the console. And I made this response video that was essentially what we're talking about. Like, okay, but that's assuming you can get the console. That's assuming you can get the game. That's assuming you can afford it. And then most of these games, like a Nephi Quest, like, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. Like,
yeah. And also, I don't know how it is necessarily with software development and stuff, but, as you're talking about, the people who would deserve a paycheck for some of these games, there's no way to get them a paycheck.
No.
There's no way to find out. It's all, in a very distant past. And so I don't think it makes sense to just say, well, I can't do it on original software and hardware. And that feels a little elitist to say the only way to play this is to own a console and maintain a console. That's not easy. I don't really even have room for a lot of consoles. I have to keep everything kind of packed away and pull them out one at a time because my space doesn't allow me to have all of them set up all at once. I would like that.
It'd be awesome.
I can't.
Yeah. Some people can do it, and then you have to invest in like your HDMI splitters and your upscalers and like you have the TV. I think originally I was going to bring it up is the preservation. So one thing that I in that video I learned that I'm really passionate about is like, if it wasn't for emulation giving access so that someone can go and do a 4-hour deep analysis of some random DOS game that no one's ever heard of, but you have this YouTuber out there. That's what I love about the internet is I can go find someone that did a 6-hour analysis of Nephi's Quest or something, right? Some obscure game, and I can find them out there they can only do that because of emulation. And it's like this,
exactly.
It's like the reason why you donate money to Internet Archive, which I probably should because I use that site all the time.
Yeah.
And people always ask me, where do I get my games? I say, I can't tell you, wink, wink. And they also, Internet Archive has a subset called, have you run across the Prelinger Archive? It's all public domain footage of like movies, like silent movies. So I use it a lot for visuals for my music project, whereas like everything in this archive
that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Has reached whatever 75 year, 100 year, whatever the law is, right? It's now public domain. So Internet Archive is awesome and emulation is awesome. The reason I brought that up with the response videos is at the end of that video, I made an argument like we should be really grateful for emulation because right now you're lucky if you're in North America or Canada or Japan, like there is access to a secondhand market. And if you really do love playing on physical hardware and a CRT TV, you can make that happen right now. But as time goes on, eventually the only place you're going to have access to a console is a museum.
Yeah.
So a lot of these games are already abandoned. And if it wasn't for emulation, if it wasn't for the Internet Archive, if it wasn't for people having access to them and then YouTube playing in where you can put on chores and watch a long play of an old game,
right?
All of these games would be forgotten, completely forgotten.
Well, and it's also one of the things that I learned. I went to an arts high school. One of the classes we were required to take there was art history, which we didn't. I mean, I remember collectively, my whole class, we didn't really want to, and it's a school for artists. So I was in visual arts and there's like media arts, dance, music, and writing. So we all had our own art fields, but art history was a very important focus for that. And we didn't really want to learn that. And my art teacher, shout out to Craig Farmer, he told us that this was going to be one of the most important classes, going on into the future. And he was absolutely right, because the more I understood about art history and how one thing influenced another thing, influenced another thing, influenced another thing that brought us up to now, that information with reference to art history and musical history makes everything where it is now so much more relevant, so much more vibrant, so much more interesting, because I know the history and path of what influenced what to how we got to here. And if you could not go back and explore video game history because you can't do it on, these old pieces of technology, then you are missing out on understanding how great the state of video games is right now. Yeah. Because I know this whole history of like, not to say that games fall into two categories of good and bad, but like, this awkward type of camera control, which led to a better type of camera control, which led to where we're at with this masterful level. So I can have a deeper appreciation for camera controls in a modern game because I've seen everything before that.
Yes.
For someone right now, and of course I had all these systems growing up. I had this old PC. That PC is gone. It would be complicated and expensive for me to get, a 1995 Acer computer and then try and find CD-ROMs to try and install it. That would be very complicated and expensive, and if anybody wanted to do that, they should be allowed to, or, at least be able to. History of these things is all really important. And, this happens with film too. I watched a lot of Mystery Science Theater 3000. There are a lot of people who think that, do you know Mystery Science Theater?
I'm aware of the series, but I've never watched it. Like cult classic for sure.
Yeah. And they watch, it's writers making, jokesy riffs about old movies and typically bad movies. They're funny. There were a lot of people who felt that by making fun of these movies,
they were disrespecting
these guys are the most disrespect. But the other thing is, in some cases, some people's careers, like these movies would not have been seen otherwise, but they have a new life with Mystery Science Theater. And of course, the jokes are also kind of lighthearted. They're not like attacking these actors or whatever, just kind of making fun of some of the, set designs or, poor acting, poor direction. But some of these movies that they make fun of have an entire second life because they've been brought to life through Mystery Science Theater. I just think a lot of this, it's really important for all of us to remember within our own fields and, also with video games, where we came from. And
Yep.
emulation is a really great way to do that.
Yeah, there's speaking of that, like there are so many good creators on YouTube that are focusing on certain genres or certain consoles or certain eras of gaming. I watch a lot of stuff where it's like, you know, a 7-hour breakdown of this particular game where they go through every single, right? And I'm like, I'll chunk it through for a week and a half. And I'm not going to play it, but I'll watch this person go through this random old game that I've heard about that I'm slightly interested in and analyze every line of dialogue and tell you the history and the developers and what they were, you know. It's like, there's one series I want to give it a shout out called Retro Amnesia. It's like a book club. They play old JRPGs. It's two guys and they'll play a section of a game.
Retro Amnesia?
Retro Amnesia. It's a podcast. They'll play like a section of a JRPG and then they'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And the very first JRPG they did was Xenogears, and they did like 80 something episodes on Xenogears.
Wow.
Right? That wouldn't
That's
exist.
a lot of analysis.
Yeah. That wouldn't exist. And like just in the YouTube rabbit hole goes so deep on anything, and in the gaming world, all that wouldn't exist. There are people out there preserving history and giving second life to games that I would never heard of. And that's what I immerse myself in. And I like covering that. And like I'm very meticulous about like all the people that author the hacks or the texture packs or the fan translations. I have a spreadsheet that's in my link tree to like everything I use. This is what you can find. And I make sure all the like people are credited.
Yep.
Because like, yeah, like it's important to me, like the world of gaming and the history and the culture of the retro stuff, right? I think the modern stuff is always going to be covered well. And there's people who are doing a great job at that, but you can go down any rabbit hole. Like I bet we were talking about, what was the one that you talked about? Interstate 76.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I typed that in, Interstate on YouTube, I remember seeing multiple full plays, a review called Interstate 76 is a vehicular combat poetry and over an atom analysis review.
Yeah.
Like just like this game I've never heard of. There's content there. There's an ecosystem there. And it just wouldn't exist without essentially, like I admit, it's technically piracy. But
right. Yeah.
it is what it is, right? And I'm the same way. Like I remember putting out music and like this, finding it on torrent sites and just being like, well, you know, I pirated Ableton for like the first 5 years.
Hey, same. Yeah.
And I remember reading, I don't know if it's the current CEO, the CEO at the time, saying, we get a lot of ourselves from people who pirate it initially, and we're totally aware, and we actually go out of our way to make it not that hard to pirate Ableton because we think you're going to be a customer. And then now I've been paying for Ableton for, I don't know, 15 years, like whatever, right?
Yeah. Okay. I started with Ableton 4.0, and then I started pirating it at 7.0. And then I bought it I bought 7, and then I've been paying for it since 7. So
we just upgraded to 11, and now 12 is coming out, and like
yes.
I'm like, God
I
damn
haven't.
it.
I got an offer to download the beta for 12, but I haven't done it yet.
You haven't done it yet?
No.
Yeah, we'll see. I was slow to get 11. We kept having like collabs with people where they would send it back in 11, and I'd be like, shit, I can't open this because I'm still on 10.
Yeah.
Anyway, so anything from this era, then I kind of want to go through maybe what other big hitters, and then I have like a set sort of motif of questions I like to end with guests.
For sure. Yeah.
So is there anything else from this era or a PS1, PS2, like any of the big hitters that really impacted you?
So there was a time in my life when I had a PlayStation 2, and an Xbox all at my house, all at the same time. Oh, you know, I got to play Steel Battalion on the big controller. That's one game experience that I've gotten to have that I don't think many people have gotten to have.
Yeah, that's like, for those who don't know, this original Xbox, right?
Yes.
Steel Battalion is a mech game, for those that aren't aware, that had this, like, I think it's a controller that was only worked for that particular game.
It was just for that. Yep.
And it was like this
You had
module.
It was like felt like a whole console, and you had 2 joysticks, I think, and a throttle, and then a bunch of knobs and controls, the faders and dials and buttons. And the controller on its own was like, I think like $150 when it came out. And then, you'd get the game and it just worked for the one game. But
yeah, I found a picture. So it's 2 joysticks and then like a center console with buttons. And then this video, which I don't remember, there's also pedals. Do you remember pedals?
Yes, and the pedals, yeah.
Yes, and
that
pedals.
Was your throttle. Yeah.
This was like a racing sim, but it was for a mech sim. And Steel Battalion is a first-person mech warrior-esque game. I've never played it, but the controller is definitely like talked about in gaming circles.
Yeah.
So was it worth did you buy it all yourself?
I bought a whole video game collection from a friend of mine when he had to move and like change his life. He wanted to get rid of everything. So I was able to buy a whole his entire collection that he had been working on for a long time. And I was not able to hold on to that collection myself, which is kind of a bummer because he had a Jaguar 64 also.
Yeah, that's a very rare console.
Yeah, weird games for that. Played a few of those, but this was maybe 2003 when I bought all that, and like I didn't get into it. I mean, I played each one of the games, but like didn't finish any of them. But yeah, all of Steel Battalion. I had a copy of. Oh, and I had a Sega Saturn that I got from him too, and I had Panzer Dragoon Orta, which was a rare game. It probably still is.
Is one of them. All the Panzer Dragoons on Saturn are very expensive.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I should have held on to that. I could,
Yeah.
I could have sold it to someone now, but yeah.
I sold my entire PS1 collection when I was early married and low on cash, and it was worth like $2,500 at the time. I bet. I just shudder to think how much. I would have just kept it because it was my childhood, but it happens to the best of us, dude.
Yep. And one of the only other like unique gaming experiences that I've gotten to have that I don't know if everybody has been able to, but like Zelda 4 Swords Adventures with 2 GameCube controllers and 2 Game Boy Colors, and I was playing at the same time with me and my 3 brothers, so we all got to play that game all at the same time. That was really fun.
So I thought that was a Game Boy game.
Yes, but we played it on the GameCube with the Game Boy player for GameCube.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. You could use either a GameCube controller or a Game Boy Color as a controller, and I had 2 Game Boy Colors and 2 GameCube controllers, and we were able to play the game. That was really, really fun.
I totally forgot about the Game Boy player because there was like a Game Boy player-esque peripheral for the Super Nintendo too.
Yes, there was the top-loading. Yeah,
top-loading one.
Yep.
Yeah, so you played 4 Swords on the GameCube with your...
Yes.
Yep, that is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty fun.
I've never played 4 Swords. How do you feel about 4 Swords as a Zelda game? In the franchise?
It's not my favorite. Definitely not my favorite. And we weren't able to finish it because we only had like a weekend, and we kind of, we lost interest after a certain point. But it was still fun having all 4 of us play it.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd normally wrap up with a handful of questions.
Sure. Yeah.
So we kind of got into a couple of them. But what is your favorite game soundtrack?
I'm gonna go with Final Fantasy VI soundtrack.
And any particular track off of that?
I don't know the names of the songs, but the music that plays in the opening prologue, that fills me with emotion every single time.
So I usually ask favorite JRPG. Is that also Final Fantasy VI?
See, it's been ongoing for a long time too, but it can be a toss-up between Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger as 2 games that were so significant for me. But also, I don't know, we did talk about Final Fantasy VII a lot in this, and I think I spent more time on Final Fantasy VII than I ever have with Chrono Trigger. I think favorite JRPG, I'm going to say Final Fantasy VII.
Have you played the remake? The first
No,
episode?
I don't have a way to play it, so...
Oh yeah, you don't have a PC, you don't have a console.
My brother has a Steam Deck, and I got to play a little bit of that last year, but only for 25 minutes or so.
Favorite character arc, character progression, character growth, favorite character in Will.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, I'd also be interested in film too, if you have something like, you have a big one, I'm just interested in I'm interested in the art that other artists, that inspires them, right?
Favorite character arc. Let me think about that for a second, because I don't know right now.
I'll give you an example, so that you can give me some time to think. And mine is more modern. I don't know. You probably, because you don't have a console, you probably never played Last of Us 2.
No, haven't played it.
So how do I talk about this? Because you should play it. It's a masterpiece of a game. There's two main characters, and they're mirrored. One character is sort of redeeming themselves after coming out of the darkness, losing themselves to violence and revenge. And then the other character is descending into losing themselves to anger and violence and revenge. And it's sort of a meta commentary on the circle of violence that happens. Violence begets violence, right?
Yeah.
And it takes somebody just to say, I'm not going to perpetuate this. So there's two characters, and you see their journeys mirror themselves. The very beginning of the game, one character does some really messed up shit to another character that everybody loves. And then you have to play as that character, but you hate that. You hate that character.
Right.
Right. But then you learn kind of why that character did what they did, and you understand that they were sort of justified. By the end of the game, you're I understand why they did what they did. Yeah. Even if I don't agree with it, I see where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And you see that person deal with the consequence of it didn't bring them peace, giving in to the darkness and the hate and the revenge, and they come out of it. Meanwhile, the other character is descending into that. And so you have it was I thought it was a very, they juggled two things. First off, they took the series where people did not want to go. They did things that pissed off everybody. The balls it took for them to do that. It's do you ever play Metal Gear Solid 2?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So everybody was hyped for that game. You're at Kojima, there's all this pre-stuff. We see the demo comes out, I think for Zone of the Enders 1 or 2, had a Metal Gear Solid 2 demo. I rented that game for the demo. You play the tanker. Metal Gear Solid 1 was this bombshell. Everyone loves Snake, but secretly he's you silly shits. I'm actually going to make you play as this other guy.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And everyone was that's ballsy.
Yeah.
And there's people who could argue that whether he was successful on that or whether that was a good choice or not. I've heard arguments both ways. The Last of Us 2, it's a different type of twist, but they do things that you just wouldn't have expected, and then they sort of juggle this double character arc. And I found that whole thing, it's one of my favorite games of all time, and that's a little bit newer, but specifically the story just really impacted me.
That's really good storytelling. Even as you've just described it, even though I haven't seen it, but haven't played it, that is really...
I tried not to you should play it. Hopefully it doesn't spoil too much. Who's your favorite antagonist?
I'm trying to think, for all the games that I've mentioned, who are the bad guys from this? Because we have, I'm going to have to go with Kefka on this one. That guy scares me a lot. And he has come back in a lot of ways, but, speaking of character arcs or whatever... That is definitely something that is interesting with Kefka's character. There's this industry trying to bring magic back into the world and make it useful, and that he, through that pursuit, made himself kind of go mad and turn into this sort of scary jester, Joker type or whatever. I think that's a great anti-capitalist sort of message. Trying to pursue power so strongly could lead to madness.
Yes, I was just thinking it's been a while since I've played 6, but he's sort of, from my memory, he starts out as not as crazy. It's almost my memory is he's sort of wheeling and dealing and working his way up in the world.
Yeah, he's close to the top in the beginning, then he becomes...
And then he takes over, and then he's sort of, from my memory, so one thing that game did that was awesome, that very few games... I don't think it was the first game that did it, but it was the first time that I experienced where the bad guy wins, kind of halfway through the game.
Yeah.
And then the world gets destroyed, and you have to like, that was like, I didn't expect that. Like, wait,
Yeah.
JRPGs are supposed to like, I killed the big bad guy and I saved the world.
Right.
But he just like destroyed the entire world.
It gets messed up. Yeah.
It gets messed up. And then he becomes almost a Joker. Like, I just want to see the world burn. There's no logic behind it.
Yeah.
I'm just obsessed with becoming God, essentially, which one of my favorite JRPG tropes is most of the time you end up killing God in some way, shape, or form.
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I think that's a good one. This is my second favorite question. I have two more. My second favorite is which game, and it could be like not the actual game, but who you were playing it with or a time in your life. But which gaming experience elicited the strongest emotional response out of you?
Strongest emotional response. I feel like, I wish I had better examples for this, but again, we're going to go with Final Fantasy VII when Aerith dies. That was pretty big. Again, and it just like in Final Fantasy VI, you didn't really know. That's not supposed to happen.
That's not supposed to happen.
Right.
It's a big, like, it's become its own, like, I don't want to say meme, but one of the most iconic deaths in all of gaming.
Yes, yeah. I got to experience that as a complete surprise. There was no spoilers for me.
Yes.
There was no, I wasn't looking on the internet about this. I didn't have the strategy guide. It just happened. And I didn't, you didn't know how to go on with the game right after that.
And I remember thinking like, okay, did she really die though? Because sometimes people don't die, right?
Yeah, right. You kind of hoped
she was. Dude, I don't know if we had this, but there were so many rumors because this is like early internet. There wasn't much of an internet. I think I had my earliest internet was Sega Dreamcast I bought specifically to get access to the internet because I had a browser. I didn't have access to the internet, like really religious household. So I think internet had been out maybe around the time that Final Fantasy VII was out. But I just remember schoolyard, cafeteria, gym rumors that like you could save her or you could revive her. And there was like this rumor, which was all fake, right?
But yeah, you can't. But
it was like, that was so impactful for so many people. There were like myths and tall tales that emerged in the culture.
Yeah.
Because everyone was, I remember that scene, how Sephiroth drops down from, I don't even know, it's not even the ceiling, just out of the sky.
It's out of nowhere, yes.
Out of nowhere and stabs her.
Yeah.
And then she drops the materia. And this is another thing about that game and many games at that era, especially the PS1 JRPGs. You played the game, but you were also always, at least I was, really excited for the next cutscene because the cutscene graphics were so mind-blowing.
Yes.
So every time it would go like, oh my God, next cutscene. And then you're excited, you're all amped.
And then what?
Wait, did that really just happen? Yeah.
Also, for the role-playing games, starting with Secret of Mana, or, starting with Zelda, you name your file or your character, you give it your name.
Yes.
And then when you could have other characters, and a lot of times the avatar, for a lot of these games, it's, a male lead. So, of course, that works as an avatar for me. And then if there's a romantic interest, you just name that character after your girlfriend or the girl you have a crush on or
100%
whatever.
I've done that. Yeah.
You do that. And so you kind of have this projection of feelings with the romantic lead, girl characters. Even though when I was playing through Final Fantasy VII, I kept her name as Aerith or whatever, but it's still the same sort of feelings. And then that happens and she's gone and she's not coming back. It really did, strengthen your resolve to go stop Sephiroth. It was personal after that.
It'd be as personal after
real
that.
life. Yeah.
I mean, it's a very popular or well-known cutscene, but it's like legendary for a reason because so many people had a similar experience.
Right.
Where it just blew their mind. My favorite question to end with is, if you became friends with Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or whoever, some bajillionaire, and they said, Mux Mool, I'm going to give you $100 million. Make whatever game you want.
Yeah.
What game would you make? What type of game would it be? What would you make? And you would obviously make the soundtrack. So
yes,
that's already That's already.
What kind of game? I'm trying to think of because I've thought of this a few times of what is the game that I would like to play that I don't think
That
exists
no one's made.
yet.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there was a style of game that up until recently, my answer would have been something. What's the new Bethesda game, the space one?
Starfield.
Starfield. So on a very old computer, I had a game called Escape Velocity, but it's the same idea. You start with a ship, you go, you transport stuff. So I played that on Mac. But basically, a game where, you're modding your ship and you go throughout the galaxy and, you encounter some pirates or you can just go explore planets. I would have said a game like that would be the game that I'd like to make, but they did just make Starfield. So now I'm not sure what I would answer that with. Boy, gosh, I don't know.
Maybe another one would be easier. If you could get the call to do the soundtrack for any franchise or game, what would be like your dream?
Absolutely. I would love to do a role-playing game, to do a soundtrack for a role-playing game.
Yeah.
I want to do town music, battle music, boss music, water music, lost music, sleep music.
Yeah.
All of those different things. I know exactly what I would want to do for all of those different themes, and I want to do it. So any kind of role-playing game would be
the dream.
Would be ideal.
Yeah.
That would be so ideal.
It makes me think of, I played a lot of Sea of Stars. I tried streaming on TikTok a little bit because it kept bugging me to do it. So I played through like quite a bit of Sea of Stars on like TikTok Live. It was pretty fun. And one of the things that kept coming up that I kept bringing up is I personally think dedicated battle music in a JRPG is a bad design choice.
You don't like it? Yeah.
Because what happened with Sea of Stars is the area music, the environment music for each area was so good. And I would be like
just getting interrupted.
Yeah, I would be so deep into it. I'd smoke a bowl. I'd have the monitors up and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm here. I'm just like, I love the music. And again, the battle, and it's not that the battle music was bad, but it kills the immersion.
Yes. Yeah.
Completely kills the immersion. And the other thing that's hard, if you don't have, in most games, you'll have like your regular battle music, then you have your boss music. And sometimes really big bosses would maybe have their own theme, but then most JRPGs, like battle music, boss music, and then maybe like an end boss music.
Yeah.
No matter how good the battle music is, eventually you're going to get sick of it because you do a lot of battling.
Yeah.
And I just realized, like, I'd never thought about it until I played Sea of Stars, but I would be more immersed in the area if the area music stayed the same during battle, but maybe you just added like a layer of drums or something to it.
Like Tears of the Kingdom, when you start getting close to enemies and the background music starts changing a little bit as you get closer.
Yeah.
I definitely picked up on that when I was playing that game, and I really liked that. Yeah.
So if you ever get the opportunity, you need to make area specific battle music variations.
And then it just, yes, no problem. I would love to do that.
It made me I would be like on stream and I'd be like, yeah, dude, this music. And people would be like, oh my God, because they were channeling Chrono Trigger music on purpose, right?
Yeah.
And they did a very, very good job. So if you like that soundtrack, you're going to like the soundtrack to Sea of Stars. In so many areas, me and commenters would be like, oh my God, this music is so good. And then you get in the battle and everyone would just be like, we were flowing. And then, it's not that this is bad, but you killed, because sometimes you're like in a cave, or for some reason, I love water music and songs that sound like.
It's usually the best.
Did you get into Thrice ever?
No.
So they have a album called The Alchemy Index, Fire, Earth, Wind, Water. It's like four, and they have they have a whole album or like a set of songs that are all like supposed to sound like water. Or I was really into Incubus for a long time because a lot of their verses, the guitar parts had like a lot of delay and reverb, and they sounded like watery. And I just there was the specific couple of water areas in Sea of Stars with the reverb and the visuals, and I was like, I'm here, baby. This was what's up.
Yeah.
And then battle music comes in, like, God damn it.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I could see someone like you. Yeah, it would be. I would find that fun too. Like, and then not only would you make like sleep music, but depending on the time and the budget, like how many, maybe you have slightly different sleep music on every town. Like every inn has its own little, like it would be really fun to get knee deep into that. Or I really like I love the sound of the PS1 reverb. I don't know if that was like a hardware thing on the PS1's chipset or just the sound fonts they had at the time. But I remember like I really like when subtle things change. Like when you're walking and you maybe walk into a concrete hall and now your footsteps sound like more reverby.
Yes, that is
like little details I think would be super fun to design.
Yeah. And I hope I get the chance to do some of that.
You probably will.
I'm sure I will.
Give people an update. What's music like? What's coming up for you? Where should people check you out? What would you recommend as a good entry point?
Well, what I have coming up is actually in about 90 minutes, I have an album dropping on Bandcamp, and it's remixes of an album I put out a couple of years ago. The album is called Partly Cloudy. It's some songs that I made during the pandemic. They're a little bit milder than my normal music, but I got a team of artists together to do remixes of it. It's got Starkey and John First and Mr. Frick, Wing Velma, Blockhead.
Blockhead?
Yeah.
He's an old school legend too.
Yes. Just a whole great team of artists. They came together and, did these remixes. It's a really diverse sounding thing, spanning from synthwave and boom bap to drum and bass. For video game lovers, check out the Nidhogg 2 soundtrack, which I did a lot of that. Most of that, I'd say. For everybody else, check out Skull Taste. That's probably my biggest album still. That's the album that got me on to Adult Swim and cable TV and stuff. So, yeah, that's probably what I'm most known for. And coming up this year, I have a lot of new songs that I'm going to be dropping this year with related video game style avatar images of me in different sort of video game environments. So, still very, very cyber myself.
So day in the life for you is still you're producing. That's your main gig. That's what you spend most of your time doing. Or do you have other art that people can check out?
You can check out my Instagram. I have some of my visual art up there, and my visual art inspires my own drawings and stuff, and inspire a lot of the other art that surrounds my music. But I do work with a lot of other visual artists. I'm working right now with a really great artist named Good King Hippo. Shout out to Mike Tyson's Punch Out. That's King Hippo's for Wes. He's been doing some really great stuff. We've been talking about this sort of late 90s cyberspace aesthetic that we're putting out for what I'm doing next. He's great.
Sweet. Any other final thoughts?
This has been great to talk about some of this stuff. I'm so glad we got to talk about obscure DOS games.
Yeah, that was probably the highlight for me, probably one of the highlights on social media. I know I'll talk about this in the intro, but I just super grateful you came on the show.
Yeah.
I was surprised. The podcast has continually given me opportunities to talk to people that I thought I would never get to talk to. And if you would have told me in the LA building when I was at college, going to English and chemistry, listening to you and Elliot Lip and hey, dude, 10 years from now, you're going to talk to this dude about video games. I'd been shut the fuck up. Right? It's kind of weird how, I get super obsessed, right? But it's you put people, you just forget that artists are just people too, right?
Yeah. And but this is something that I love that we're talking about that again, I've done interviews about music, and in some of those interviews I've talked about how video games inspire my music, but I think in this one it's been great to be able to really say how much to potential to someone who understands, and maybe even reach some other people who also understand.
I would hope so. Well, thanks guys. Shout out to Brian or Mux Mool. He's not Mule, Mool. Mool,
yes.
But Mool.
Phonetically.
Mool.
Yes.
Shout out. Check all his applicable links will be in the podcast description or the YouTube description. Other than that, share the good news of the gaming gospel. You shall be blessed. See you guys later. Bye-bye.